All right, we got another question here. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com by Barry. Been a wrestling fan since I watched Ray Morgan on my black and white TV with rabbit ears call matches of the likes of Argentina Apollo and the Flying Kangaroo Brothers from ringside. Over the
Actually,
years,
they were from Australia, but
well, they weren't brothers either, right? But either way, we know what he's talking about.
That was a grammatically incorrect sentence that I was making fun of. But yes, they weren't from ringside; they were from Australia. But Ray Morgan was calling the matches from ringside.
Over the years, a number of changes took place, and the players came and went. Of course, one of these cast members was none other than Mr. Jim Cornette. But I can't help but wonder both what wrestling would have been like without the racket-wielding instigator and what he might have chosen as a career path had he not graced us with his presence every week at ringside. So, Jim, what might you have been? Would you have opted to be a double knot spy like Jethro Bodine? Or would you have been more comfortable holding one of the many jobs of Walter Mitty? Perhaps a Midwest version of Dog the Bounty Hunter would better suit? Or would you rather champion justice as a consumer reporter, concentrating heavily on fast food chains throughout mid-America? So, sir, what say you? Inquiring minds want to know.
Well, I'm glad he didn't ask what would wrestling be like without me, because then I would have to imagine what the world would be like without my glorious presence. But what would I have done if wrestling hadn't come up? And we've talked about this, and it's been quite a long time. At some points in my life after I got into wrestling, when wrestling was ebbing and flowing, I've done radio. And I thought, I might like to get into radio past, having to go through the courses to learn how to run the board and all that shit. Otherwise than that, radio, I got the perfect face for it. But that is because of my involvement in wrestling. I don't know that I would have ever sought out or wanted to be. I didn't even get into wrestling because I wanted to be on TV. Being on TV was a byproduct of being in wrestling. You had to do the TV show to be able to go down and be on the show at the Louisville Gardens. So I don't know without wrestling that I would have done anything related to broadcasting, radio, television, whatever. I think, to be honest, the most probable thing would have been some type of journalism, writing, or reporting. Not only because of my dad and his, interests in journalism and being in the newspaper business all of his life, but just because that was what I did when I did 2 issues of my own newspaper when I was like 6 years old. Because I think my mom had to go somewhere, and I spent the afternoon over at the neighbor's 2 doors over, my dad's best friend, and his wife, let me play in Charlie's den, and he had the old typewriter there. And my dad worked for the Courier Journal, so we did my version of the Courier, and I interviewed my fucking dachshund Hans and talked about how Sadie next door had said something about one of the other neighbors, and my mom caught that in the 5 copies with the carbon paper of the newspaper that I typed out and said, "You shouldn't say that or put that in print," what she said. I would have either a writer or a journalist or something to do with, and most probably not fiction, but nonfiction if I was going to be writing. But I think without wrestling, that's probably what I would have done. I was always natural in any type of writing or spelling or English class or whatever. I read from before I even started going to fucking school. I was always head over heels for books of all types. It would have had to have been something in that field. Boring, huh?
What would wrestling have been like without Jim Cornette?
Well, I don't know. Because fuck, it might not still even exist if I hadn't been here to save it so many different times.
All right. Well, Jim, let's get another question here. This one was sent to Corny Drive-Thru.
I mean, I'm only one man.